Final Destination 5 was released in 2011. This is directed by Stephen Quale and is written by Eric Heisserer, and I did enjoy it, but it's not perfect. I am a huge fan of the Final Destination films because they genuinely terrify me. As a big horror fan, I'm sure a lot of horror fans will agree, the more horror you watch, the harder it becomes to feel scared. But because these are so realistic, okay, so on the one hand, they're exceptionally unrealistic, but at the same time, everything that happens in these could potentially, in theory, happen. I find that to be terrifying. So I always knew there would be at least part of Final Destination 5 that I enjoyed, that I loved being terrified by. But I will say, it got off to a strong start, but kind of went downhill. And I'll explain what I mean by that, but I won't give any spoilers. I won't explain any of the deaths or how they die, apart from obviously the opening scenario and how things come about, because I do recommend it. I don't want to spoil it. I might go into some spoiler detail at the end with a spoiler warning, but I will discuss that in a bit if I do. Like the rest of the Final Destination films, it is about an individual. Here we have Sam, played by Nicholas D'Agosto, who has a premonition that something bad is going to happen, and in this case, the something bad is this suspension bridge collapsing. And obviously everybody on the bridge plummeting into the water, and various other creative ways of dying in that scenario as well. Definitely some things that I hadn't expected here that made me swear out loud on numerous occasions. And of course, Sam manages to get some people off of the bus, and those who survived, who were meant to die, then begin to die as the film progresses in various very creative ways. This is the way all of the Final Destinations go, and I think it's a fantastic setup, and I think there are endless possibilities. And of course, we do have the new one coming out next year, which I'm exceptionally excited for. With this one, though, it did get off to a strong start. The bridge collapse, I thought, was very well done. A little bit slow, to be honest, but other than that, it was absolutely fantastic. And then the first death, and I won't say what it is, but I thought the first one, I was hunched over throughout the entire thing. The first death was actually very slow to play out, but in a way that worked very well, because I felt sick throughout the entire thing, and I was just waiting and waiting and waiting for it to happen, and I feel like I was becoming more and more hunched over until it finally happened. And I thought it was a very strong first actual death. And then the second one was creative. Maybe not the most terrifying, but certainly interesting. But then they just seemed to go downhill from there. I never found any of it boring, but I did feel like the quality just seemed to slip as the narrative progressed. The pacing, though, is pretty decent. We have a small amount of time in between each death, and not every death takes as long to happen as the first one. Some of them are really quite quick, so I think the variety works really well, because it means we never know when the next death is going to come. And there is one that I could not watch. I mean, I kind of did watch it, but it is Olivia's. I'll say no more than that, but you'll know which one it is if and when you see it. That one was, well, it actually wasn't the death that I couldn't watch. It was what happened before that. Not a fan, made me feel very sick. So this did affect me a lot. And obviously that's brilliant. That's why we watch those films, to feel these emotions in a very controlled environment. And it is very powerful, but it became less powerful as it went on, which is kind of the opposite of what you want from any film, really. Films shouldn't they shouldn't peak at the beginning and then gradually slide from there. It should be either the same throughout, or we should have a bit of an incline, and unfortunately it was kind of the opposite here, so that wasn't great. I also just found the last 20 minutes or so to be very boring, and I won't say exactly what happens. It's not that it doesn't make sense within the context of the film, or that it was badly written. I just feel like it was getting progressively less thrilling, to the point where ultimately I did feel a little bit bored towards the end. So it isn't perfect, but I still came away from it feeling pretty satisfied, definitely very sick, and as I said, I was hunched over for a lot of this, so also in a little bit of physical pain as well. Do I recommend it? Absolutely. If you're a fan of Final Destination films, definitely check it out. It's not perfect. It isn't my favourite. I still think the third one is my favourite. I think so. Definitely not my favourite, but if you're a fan of the films, then give it a watch. There are some really great moments. It isn't perfect, but it's worth watching still. And I can't wait for the next one. Really excited for it, and generally happy to recommend Final Destination 5.